Hello, everybody. It's almost 7. I have 1 minute till, so I think we'll go ahead and get started for this evening's program. We're so happy to see folks here. We're actually in a different room than usual, but we're still at the Campbell Center. And we also have at least 15 people Zooming right now, so maybe more will join in on the Zoom. More might come here as well. It's such a beautiful sunny day. Hopefully you got out in the garden or did some enjoyable outdoor time, because it was really a special day outside. I was so glad to see the sun. We'll see how I feel tomorrow, because we spent about 3 hours moving soil and digging out some roots and things like that. So tomorrow might be a different day. One thing I wanted to check, has anybody seen some interesting birds? What?
I know some trucks over on the land that river by Marina, where it goes to the Delta Pond. Okay, it had a gray above the eye, gray stripe, and then a gray mark on the back of its neck along the back. And I cannot figure out what kind of thrush it was. It wasn't a regular, it was the size of a robin. Does anybody want to contemplate that?
We have a thrush question, but
not. I have looked at every bird one. I have looked everywhere for
it's a little bit hard description.
Yeah, well, it had a speckled front. You know, like a thrush. You know, what do you call it? It wasn't a Swainson's, and it wasn't whatever the other one.
Hermit.
Yeah, no.
Well, neither of those, then I don't know what it could have been. All right, we'll hold that for later. We'll ponder that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I'm looking around and
Towns in solitaire?
well,
Maybe towns in solitaire?
It was sat, and it sat there for quite a while thinking, so I got very close. I was right there, like next to it.
okay.
And then it's still to the brush, so.
Well, we will get back to you after maybe, and we ponder this. So we want to keep moving now. So I did want to make, my name's Mava. I'm with Lane County Audubon Society. We have a good crowd here in the hall. And I did want to make one quick announcement that this coming Friday, the 28th, we will be at Agate Hall Chimney again to look at Fox's swifts. It's supposed to be a beautiful sunny day. There, I know there's more swifts around right now. 2 weeks ago, on a very cold, not sunny day, we saw about 200 swifts go down the chimney. So we know there's more here now. Friday should be marvelous. So if you've not seen that, come down and join us for watching the box of swifts. But you can also go any other time you want to, but it's a fun thing to enjoy together. So I will let Dennis now announce our speaker for tonight. We're glad to see everybody here, and we're looking forward to the program. Thank you.
Hi, I will mention a bird though, just because there's been a real kind of eruption of calliope hummingbirds in our area. And so if you're in your backyard and you see a hummingbird, take a closer look. It could be a calliope. They've been seen in many different places, especially on Skinner Butte. But today I had 4 out at Green Island, which is a restricted area, but just amazing. So I got some great videos and photographs of them and put them on my eBird page. So if you're an eBirder, take a look at those. It's pretty good. Look in your backyard too. Well, I want to start by telling you a little bit about next month. Next month, May 23rd, right? In this building, I don't know about this room, that's in this building anyway, we'll have our last of our sort of season of program meetings. And we're going to have a young woman who, as I was thinking about telling you about her, I was realizing the similarities between our May speaker and our speaker tonight. Tonight, we have, I think you all know, we have Marina Ritchie. Well, our speaker in May is Karina. And it's Karina Kusaka. She's a graduate student at Oregon State University. Our speaker tonight and Karina in May will talk about a single species. And that species has a magnificent bill, just like our speaker's bird for tonight, and also an amazing headgear. She's going to talk about tufted puffins. And she's been doing research on the tufted puffins along our coast. And so she's going to share with us all sorts of information about how well they're doing. You know, why aren't we seeing them where we used to see them 30 years ago, and all those kind of things. So that's going to be next month, May 23rd. So tonight, I already told you the speaker's name, and you all knew that anyway, but I usually hold that to the end. I don't know why. And she's the author of Halcyon Journey, which is a book I finished a couple of weeks ago. It's amazing. I hope that you all have a chance to get a copy in the back. What I liked about the book particularly was, not only a lot of information about belted kingfishers, but there was a lot of autobiographical bits in there that really made it a human story that you could really, get yourself into. So it's really a good book to read. So please think about getting a copy of that. Marina lives in Bend right now. She's been doing this program all over the place. She did it in Walla Walla a few days ago. And I looked at the video of her program that she did for the Corvallis Audubon Society. And they did a much better introduction for her, because I don't remember all the awards and their degrees and everything. But she's just a fantastic person, and we're so glad to have her. So let's give Marina a nice warm welcome.
Here I'm on screen. Okay, good. Thanks, Dennis. Really appreciate that. And also giving a little pitch for my book because you read it. That was really nice. I appreciate that. So welcome. My little birdie news before I get started is I can barely take my attention away from my yard and Bend because of the yellow-rumped warblers. And I think you're having them here too, right? They're just so gorgeous and they're everywhere. Right? So tonight, I'm really delighted that you are taking the time on a beautiful evening to come to this program. And the belted kingfishers, the theme for tonight is secrets of the belted kingfisher. And as a lot of you probably know, these are elusive birds often, and skittish and wary, and known for vanishing around the next bend and many other things. So I'm going to launch right in with a very important part of this program, and that is to give my humble gratitude for the indigenous peoples who have known the belted kingfisher since time immemorial. Rattled greetings from the kingfisher. Let's see if that works. Oh. Y'all know that call, a lot of us? Well, after you just heard that call, look at the indigenous names for the belted kingfisher. I put up a few here that I've come to know. The top two are from the Kuzhanis and the Sayusla and Lower Umpqua, so southern part of the Oregon coast. And in Kuzhanis, the word is pronounced Shijiktis, and the other Sayusla, Lower Umpqua is Chiaki. And then over in the Montana, Missoula area, the Salish people call the kingfisher Tishlis. And then I just learned this in February at the Winter Wings Festival from the Yurok tribe. I asked one of the speakers there, and she told me the name is Shilel. And I just love the musicality of those names for the kingfisher. How are we doing? Am I showing up okay?
You're good. I'm gonna fix one thing.
She's gonna fix something. Okay. We know how this, we want to take good care of all our people on Zoom. So shall I wait for a second?
Go ahead.
Okay, we will keep going. Oh. But first I wanted to say this. This kingfisher that I chose to go with this, with the beak open, she is very excited because she's going to give you some news, like a drum roll through her rattle, which is this, in case you didn't know this yet. Oops. Okay, now I'm pushing this. Okay, there it goes. How many of you knew the belted kingfisher is the American Birding Association 2023 Bird of the Year? Isn't that exciting? They only picked one, and they've never picked the belted kingfisher before. And my book just happens to be the only one on the belted kingfisher. And I love that the artist named her kingfisher the queen fisher. So very exciting. There's all kinds of things going on with the American Birding Association's podcast on kingfishers all year, and every issue has things on kingfishers. In fact, I did write a story for their June issue about deep birding and kingfishers. So this is my book, and as Dennis kind of gave a hint, it's a threading of natural history and memoir and some mythology, a first-person adventure that takes you, it's a good armchair book, but it's going to get you outside, I think, too. And I'm very grateful for the many authors who reviewed and blurbed my book. I just put up David George Haskell because he was just here speaking in Eugene the other day for the Eugene Natural History Association. I wish I'd been there. And Kathleen D. Moore, too. So, and also, I always am grateful for the Oregon State University Press. I am a duck. I went to University of Oregon, and I have come to appreciate OSU Press. So they've been wonderful. But it's so good to be back in Eugene, and you know, I graduated a long time ago from here, but it's always got fun memories, and just over the Cascades now. And then I was fortunate to receive an award, a National Outdoor Book Award for the book at the end of the year. So the book is enlivened by the illustrations of someone I think a lot of you know here. Ron Popish has talked to this group many times. He lives in Newport. He's a great artist and photographer and funny. And he did 16 illustrations for the book. And I'm really happy that he was able to be my illustrator. Plus, he's a lot of fun. And we have worked together another hat I wear is I write interpretive signs. And I did a whole series on the Oregon coast. Maybe you might have seen a few of these there, and like 25 locations on the Oregon coast for the Oregon Islands National Wildlife Refuge. And wherever there was art, Ram did the art. And as you notice, there's puffins for your next speaker. So, I also sneaked in some kingfishers. Well, my book came out a year ago. And I had to put in a few pictures when some of my friends and others got the book, they sent me pictures reading it outside, which I really enjoyed. I'm like, yes, that's where this book should be read. I highly recommend it. It's okay if you get the pages a little bit warped and torn or whatever. And some people had a little more fun with that, their dog and the cactus. And that's me on climbing up to the top of Stewart Peak last summer in Missoula. And if you read the book, that's significant. It's the headwaters for Rattlesnake Creek, where much of my book takes place, and also has some personal meaning. So I had to do an 18-mile round trip with my husband Wes and my son Ian last summer. Well, before we dive into the book part, and I wanted to just do that thing we always do where you compare a bird to a robin. And a belted kingfisher is just a tad larger than a robin, but it's fun to put them side by side because you can see the differences when that magnificent head and crest and outsized head and the beak of the kingfisher. And I like to think this particular robin is competing because, look at that, how many berries in the hole. So the robin is pretty happy about being a robin, and a robin can also hop around the yard, which a kingfisher has teensy tiny feet, so you won't see them ever hopping anywhere. And but you'll find out those feet have a pretty amazing role. And of course, we know belted kingfishers are magnificent anglers, and you'll hear more about that, the way they can fish and dive and all the secrets to their success that probably many anglers are quite envious of. And this kingfisher here is flipping the fish because she's going to make sure that head is going head first down her gullet when she swallows, so the scales aren't going the wrong direction. In a pinch, the kingfisher will catch a crayfish and quite a few other things, frogs and sometimes big aquatic insects. And I just learned a story. Whenever I travel, every time I talk to these many different Audubon groups and others, at the end, I hear these great anecdotes. Like last time I learned that a person watched kingfishers in the Midwest, I think, where the mud puppies are. And this kingfisher was just nailing the mud puppies. I guess they must have been kind of like a hot dog or something. I was just down, didn't have to break the bones or anything. Well, in this presentation tonight, I'm going to give you a sense of the book too. And so I'm going to read a few little excerpts. And this one, we can get this. There we go. It has to do with this picture. And I also wanted to point out quite a few of the photos in my presentation are from Charles Wheeler. He's a wonderful photographer of kingfishers up in Potlatch, Idaho. He has a blind, and he has given me permission. When I looked at this picture, I was like, wow, that's kind of like what I wrote about. I saw her, a female kingfisher, perched on a fallen tree, moored in the center of the river. Her crested head was the blue of washed denim, tousled and sodden. White neck feathers formed a gleaming ring above a slate blue band that dipped to a point on her snowy chest. Below that, a rusty red belt clasped in mid-belly and draped down both flanks, partly hidden by closed wings of blue-gray hues. Only the female wears the namesake belt, and that could be meaningful. In contrast, a male shows a single bluish upper band, like a prim bandana on his white breast. In the bird world, males are almost always more colorful than females when there's a difference between the two. The rare gender reversal drew me in like the myth. You'll hear more about the myth. Could I chase clues to this puzzle that scientists had yet to solve? A male flew in, a pinwheel of whites and thunderous blues. His flurry of notes pattered like rain. She preened her wet feathers. He landed and then lifted off, each downward wing stroke scooping the heavy air. She followed him skyward, wheeling to expose white underwings with the reddish plumage extending into her armpits like the work of a slapdash painter. Circling once, they descended in unison to the same driftwood that parted the currents. He looked upriver, and she swiveled her head to glance downriver. Out in the middle of the turbid Yellowstone River, the pair seemed unperturbed by the torrent. Or were they? Perhaps their hearts beat faster in each other's presence, like two people on a park bench in the rain, wildly attracted to each other. Well, here's a big secret of the kingfisher. They don't nest in stick nests, do they? They nest in an earthen burrow on a vertical stream bed, and they dig it with those tiny little toes. And they make a tunnel that can be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 feet deep, ascending slightly at about the size of a tennis ball in the circular part, and then it will end in a football-sized burrow where the female will lay 5 to 8 eggs typically. So you'll be hearing more about that. It's pretty phenomenal. And another thing that's quite phenomenal about kingfishers is the belted kingfisher is by far only one of many, many species out there. And I'd like to ask this question, just as a hint, we know that we just keep finding out that there's more and more species than we thought because of genetics and taxonomy. So how many kinds of kingfishers do you think there are in the world? How many species? Does anyone want to take a guess, or you might know? Just go out. You don't have to raise your hand. Just say a number. 56. Excellent. Another guess?
65.
65. Do we have, I should have like a prize, you know, for the winner. Probably some people in the chat are chatting, but, you know, sorry, I can't see what you're guessing, but, okay, I will give a hint more. Anyone want to go higher?
87.
87. Okay, here you go. 120. Wow, I know. So that's a lot of kingfisher species in the world. They're found on every continent except Antarctica. But as you know, here in the US, we have the belted kingfisher in Canada. And only when you get down to our southern border do you run into some tropical kingfishers, the ringed kingfisher and the green are the two most likely would see every now and then in Amazon will come up over the border as well. So they can range in size from the African dwarf kingfisher that would fit in your palm like a hummingbird, all the way to the laughing kookaburra, which is a kingfisher, enormous. And many of them are not fishing birds. They will like be in the tropics and the forests, and they'll still dive head first. And that's the thing, but they will be going after little lizards or insects. So, but wherever you go to see kingfishers in the world, and you can kind of see in this little poster, they have those recognizable, large, oversized heads and those amazing beaks. And then they tend to have the tiny feet, and they're burrow nesters. But some of them have long tails, whereas our belted kingfisher has a very short, perky tail. So unfortunately, more than half of them are considered at risk from critically endangered to vulnerable. Our belted kingfisher is doing better. You know, it's not considered a problem for our kingfisher, but I think the kingfisher is a good messenger for our wild waterways to make sure we're taking care of them, and especially in a time of climate change and all the drought that's happening. So kingfishers got to have fish-filled good water. So do we all. So here I was showing you the range of the belted kingfisher. You can see up in the northern part of the range. The reason why you only find belted kingfishers up in the Yukon and those places in breeding season is because guess what? The water freezes, so they will move down into the purple area, which is where kingfishers are found year round. But the blue is where they also are the wintering kingfisher. So some are migrating, and they tend almost always to be the females that migrate, because the males want to stick around and guard their territories, especially a good nest bank, which is a hot piece of real estate. Well, I wanted to read you another little section. This is about a nest, and it's since we're so close to the Oregon coast, my book isn't very much about Oregon, but in the introduction, I have this piece, and this particular photo is exactly the place. As golden sun rays lapped upon a sandstone outcrop that stood between me and a vigilant kingfisher, the receding high tide yielded just enough room to edge around the corner within view of a nest hole excavated by the diligent parents. One cautious step at a time, I ducked below leathery green leaves of a salal bush. In my black down jacket, gray pants, and rubber boots, I hoped to blend in like a cormorant. Instead, I faced the full fury of an indignant queenfisher. Her crown was a feathery two-part crest, her throne a lichen-draped branch, and her decree a volley of reproving notes. I gazed with longing at the burnished coppery red belt on a moon-white chest and yearned to plead my case. I'm your subject. I will stay right here and fasten myself to the sandstone cliff like a barnacle. I won't be in your way. But no, she breezed off to cross the bay that opened to the Pacific. I backed away into the linger of light, leaving the nesting kingfishers in peace. And I do still go to this particular bank and check it out every year. But let's turn now to where the heart of my book takes place. And that's in Rattlesnake Creek on Missoula, Montana. And there from 7 years, from spring 2008 Through the summer of 2015, I followed with great curiosity as the birds continued to baffle, elude, and enlighten. So let's go there now. And Ram created this lovely map. That's at the beginning of the book. I can use this fun thing. Okay, let's see if I could do this. Oh, you have a spot. Oops. Okay, sorry. I'm trying the little. Okay, let's see if we can do this. There. That's the headwaters of Rattlesnake Creek and Rattlesnake National Recreation Area, Stork Peak, where I was showing you. And then the creek flows 22 miles down to the Clark River. And the Salish, that's called, the confluence is called the place of the bull trout. And then that's Missoula down there. And I lived in the Middle Valley there. Okay, so let's go on. How the heck did I come up with the name Halcyon Journey for the name of a book about belted kingfishers? Well, I thought I knew what the word Halcyon meant. And at the time right before I chose the belted kingfisher to follow, I was at the stage of life where I really wanted to go deep with a bird, but I liked so many birds. And I knew I wanted to find a bird that was close to where I lived at the time in Missoula, but I didn't know which one. And then one morning, this is what happened. Leaning over the balcony railing of the second-story bedroom, I listened to the surge of Rattlesnake Creek flooding 2 blocks away. Close by, a yellow warbler sang the morning into buttery sweetness. Robins caroled, magpies squawked, but the ringing staccato of the bird I longed to hear would never mingle with backyard birds. Instead, the belted kingfisher would be pelting downstream on strong wings, always looking for fish. Minutes earlier, I read the dictionary word of the day, which you can see on the screen. And the #1 definition, noun, a kingfisher, startling to me. 2, that it's a mythical bird identified with the kingfisher that was fabled to nest at sea about the time of the winter solstice and to calm the waves during incubation. 3, calm, quiet, peaceful, undisturbed, happy as deep halcyon repose. And 4, marked by peace and prosperity as halcyon years. Well, I was in, definitely. So tracing the halcyon definition to an ancient Greek myth, I read of 2 lovers, Halcyon and Ceyx, transformed by the gods Zeus and Hera into kingfishers, destined to nest annually over the winter solstice. Then Aeolus, god of the winds and father of Halcyon, would calm the rough waves for 14 days, 7 on either side of the solstice. Sailors called the interlude the Halcyon days, bracketed by storms. Well, as we know, I think I told you, kingfishers nest in a burrow, not out on the sea, but it is a myth after all. And this is the common kingfisher, a beautiful bird you'll find across Europe and Asia. And then in my book, I actually do go to London, have a chapter where I'm following and looking for the common kingfisher on Hampstead Heath. Well, transformation I was in. Since childhood, I dreamed of feathers, light hollow bones, and lofting above the earth on wings that would never let me fall. Pursue a bird of happiness and transformation. Oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. And there I am at age 8 with my brother, and my older brother, and we were at Mount Rainier National Park, where I lived when I was a kid. My dad was in the National Park Service, and that was a place where I truly was transformed by the natural world and big mountains, and pretty much knew I was going to make sure my life had a lot to do with being out in those kind of places. So, well, I got interested in the book, of course, and saying, well, what are the myths of the belted kingfisher, the indigenous stories, and are there any crossovers with the Greek myth? And I found quite a few. And I love this particular story. I'm just going to share a brief part of this. This is from the origin story of the Arikara people of the Upper Missouri. Without the help of the kingfisher, the Arikara people of the Great Plains would not have found a better world. To journey westward from a hiding place underground after the creator sent floodwaters to eliminate giants, 3 birds helped them overcome obstacles to reach a better place. A kingfisher, an owl, and a loon. Coming to a chasm, Kingfisher reshaped the earth and laid down an enormous beak that served as a bridge. With a great flapping of wings, Owl cleared a thorny forest, and fast-flying Loon parted a lake. This is the part I love. The people could choose whether to continue or turn into the bird that helped them. Well, Kingfisher, I'd be tempted. And how many of you, does anyone know which owl this is? Great. I love that owl. Well, turns out I would need all the help I could get because I went into this with this naivety. Oh, yeah, the kingfisher. I'm going to follow the happiness bird. And I'm like, oh, this is a really tough bird. Just always vanishing, not at all easy to follow. And here's the Rattlesnake Creek and where I spent a lot of time. And the first season was particularly challenging and also wonderfully in depth. And I thought I had found a nest hole in this bank right here. You can kind of see, I'll do with I'm gonna try it this way. There you go. See, there's a nest hole, but there's other ones. And here's the thing, is over the years, belted kingfishers make different holes. And so that means there's a lot of different holes. And sometimes they make a new one, sometimes they use an old one. So it's like a guessing game. And then as it turns out, you might have missed the bank altogether and be looking completely in the wrong place. So this was one I spent a lot of time with. This is my friend Sandra, who is my soul sister friend. And she came out and we had a lot of time together. I mean, part of it is you're alone and you're having these incredible experiences in nature, watching, waiting, looking, but it was also a time to connect with my friend. And eventually, oh, wait, I have this part, that's why I put her in. There's a funny little thing here. Okay, this is from the book. When scents of wild onion buffed the air, furled maple leaves dusted the sky, a wild turkey promenaded past us, his hot pink wattle flashing like an orchid in the jungle depths. The first mosquito of the season bit Sandra's forehead. Not total bliss. Well, at last, I had this amazing discovery, at least for me, was to find the active nest hole. And this boulder is actually the boulder of that first season's nest hole where the kingfishers would land often with the fish before they would fly up into the hole. Both the male and the female are really great parents. So they help all the way through. They're egalitarian. You know, the kingfisher female, she lays the eggs, but then the male incubates them just as much as she does. They both feed the chicks at about the same degree of commitment. So they're a pretty good model for the rest of us, I think. So this, you can see this wonderful photo of a kingfisher delivering a small fish to the chicks deep in a burrow. That's not my burrow, but great photo. And one of the things, remember I told you there's a secret about the kingfisher to being such a good angler, is these kingfishers are so good at catching fish that they can select the right size to catch to feed their chicks. And one way you know how the age of a chick as they grow over the course of a month is that the parents are delivering slightly bigger fish each week, you know, so that you can tell by the time it's about time for them to fledge, they're full size and they're delivering them big fish. Well, that first season, I got pretty excited, found these kingfishers to watch, and this is what we can't really see it on the screen, so let's see, here we go, I wrote this. Whenever a kingfisher sleeted into view with the fish, I was on high alert. Questions eddied, but the kingfishers were really on high alert, and boy, did they not like me being anywhere near them, no matter how much I tried to hide. So I did get a hide. I got a camouflage blind, and I found this perfect thing. It's a turkey hunting blind from Cabela's, and to set it up on this little island and across in the creek in the shelter. And so I wrote this about setting up the blind just right after I set up the blind. The world had changed from within the blind. On the one hand, it felt confining. On the other, I was like Harry Potter, wearing his cloak of invisibility. Brits have a different term for blinds. They call them hides. I could see the advantage of both names. I wanted the birds to be blind to my presence as I hid like a child in a game of hide and seek. And other things changed. Bang, a dipper climbed into the front screen. I ducked as if someone had thrown a dirt pod. The groggy bird staggered to his feet and lurched into the air. The dipper's world had changed too. I think I put that line right where those dippers like to fly through the opening. And I often watched it. My book has a lot of dippers in it too, because the dippers nested on the creek very close to the kingfisher nest. And they were really easy to watch compared to the kingfishers that never, ever get used to you, ever. Well, there was so much action when I was watching on the blind, with the birds coming and going and keeping track of it. But there are also interludes, just being out there where nothing was going on with the birds, but there was always more going on with all kinds of other wildlife. And there was time also for me to contemplate things like my connection to my dad. And that's a big part of the book. He had passed away from cancer a few years before I started this project. And, he was so important to me. And I found really a lot of ways to connect with him. This photo is of him with my son, Ian, when Ian was 5. So I wrote this: hiding in a camouflaged blind, I merged with the alders, cottonwoods, and pines when a Swainson's thrush landed within grasp and opened his beak to sing. I nodded to yet another sign of my bird-loving father's presence, as if we could still revel in the soloist poet of the wafting, spiraling away verse. In the company of creekside inhabitants, sorrows and losses cascaded into the clear waters where bull trout spinned upstream to spawn. Well, at last, the kingfisher chicks were ready to fledge after a lot of watching. And this actually is one of the chicks. I had a friend I'm not a photographer, so I had a friend come who is a photographer, and she took this one of this male looking out. And I love that image, and it reminds me, I have this picture on my wall, and it was like, just remember, what is it like to see the world as if for the first time after being this dark burrow, and you come out into this stream and rushing creek and leaves. And I think we all need to be reminded of what a miraculous planet we live on every day. Well, once the kingfisher chicks are out in the world, the fledglings, they have a lot to learn and fast. The parents are feeding them fish for the first week or so. And then after that, the little young ones have to figure it out. And this one is doing a very good job because he's looking up, and their predators come from above. This is the goshawk and Cooper's hawk. Goshawks are those are the accipiters are the predators for kingfishers. And there's quite a few stories actually of, maybe some of you have seen this, of a belted kingfisher escaping a Cooper's hawk by going under the water. And often, when we think of kingfishers, if you've seen them, they just barely go under the surface. They don't go fully submerged underwater, but they do go fully submerged underwater if they're escaping a Cooper's hawk. So this also, just on the side, the plumage on this male, you can see, has a little rusty color on the band. That's the juveniles have both male and female have that rusty upper band their first year. And sometimes you can see on the males, they'll even have a little reddish color on the sides of their wings too. Well, as I write here, only a few days after leaving the nest hole, the juveniles had entered a critical phase of flight training. Hollow bones and feathered wings were the given essentials, but the nuances of flying kingfisher style would take practice. And if ever you are so fortunate to watch young kingfishers learning, it's actually hilarious. There's many belly flops, crash landings, very poor choices of fish catching, like pine needles and cones. But eventually they got to figure it out, right? So, and boy, do they ever. Here's one of Rom's fantastic illustrations of it, that head first dive, which is so perfect. If you could slow it down, the kingfisher is just entering the water without a splash. The splash you see is when the wings hit the water, when the kingfisher goes back up. So it's quite a feat, and there's much to say about it. I'm just going to mention here their eyes. There's red oil droplets in the eyes to deal with the refraction of the water. The eyes are packed with cones for sharp vision, and they have something called a double foveae. We have one fovea that's packed with cones. They have two, like raptors, and this helps them see the fish kind of zoomed in front of them, but they can also catch what's happening on the edges. So when the little fish are trying to swim away, they can keep track of that. And that's a very simplified explanation, but there's a lot happening with kingfishers diving, catching fish, and the hover itself is quite amazing. That kingfishers are hovers. We see ospreys hovering, and it's just takes a lot of strength, especially in their neck muscles, because a kingfisher has to keep that head rock steady, right? To see the fish below if they're out in the middle of the river hovering against the wind, and their tail will be moving back and forth, and they're beating their wings fast, but the head is still. And it's all worth it to become this kind of angler. And I'm sure some of you watch, like, I never get tired of the way they just whack that fish after they catch it on the branch. And that's to both stun the fish and break the bones and to swallow it and digest it more easily. And this action too of coming back up from the water is really fabulous. And when you think about it, it's hard to push your wings off the water and go straight up like they do. And so another amazing feat of kingfishers. And you can tell on this bottom corner, the kingfisher female here, she's actually going to deliver this fish to a chick. You can tell because she's got the fish pointed the other way with the head out. Well, I got very excited about pursuing the red belt mystery, especially after my first year, and it would continue through all those years of watching kingfishers. And I'm still paying attention to just why is it that the female is brighter than the male? What's the reason for it? Well, I won't give you the answer if there is one, but I will say there's many experiences I included. I went to the lower Rio Grande and I checked out the ringed kingfisher, and that's the closest relative to the belted, and looked at those birds and their plumages and behaviors and interviewed some scientists. I also went to the back halls of the Smithsonian and checked out study skins and got really interested in the history of the tags. But I sure enough found that there's a lot of variability in the females' belts in terms of size and width and brightness, and that could be an influence in terms of some of the behaviors of maybe kingfisher females who are more dominant over other females as they try to be the one to nest with the male who has the nest bag. And I even made it over to South Africa to see another relative of the belted kingfisher, the giant kingfisher. And the Megasearle genus only has the 4 species. So the only one I didn't see was the crested kingfisher. It's over in Asia. Well, I wasn't always alone in the naturalist quest, and I give quite a bit of credit to my friends, Lisa and Paul Hendricks, who are still to this day, they live in Missoula, setting up a blind and watching kingfishers on the creek. And things have changed on the creek since then for the better. A little dam has been taken out and all kinds of rewilding is happening. Though at first it was a bit hard on the kingfishers. So this is Lisa and Paul. And together we actually discovered something exciting. Besides enjoying watching mating, though it's a bit perfunctory. It does go along with, once kingfishers are mating quite a bit in the spring, and by the way, that's going to be happening pretty quick here. We're in the season. Then they get into digging, right? They're gonna dig that nest hole. Isn't that fun watching the little feet kicking out the dirt out of that the burrow? And but what we actually saw something that had never been reported before. Well, typically when a kingfisher digs a new nest hole, they just kind of cling to the edge of the bank and get it started with their beaks, and then they'll just start kicking it out with their feet, and that's how it goes. But we saw the kingfishers do something pretty crazy, kind of kamikaze actually. They took to this one pair one year, took turns flying at the bank from about 12 feet away. It was a very hard part of this nest bank, this earthen bank, and would just slam beak first into the bank and then just be knocked out almost, like just fluttering down like that, to the water. It was wild. And then, they keep working 3 mornings in a row. We watched them. They gradually started getting a hole, a little saucer shaped hole. And eventually we're able to dig in the more normal way. But we did end up publishing a note in the Wilson Journal Ornithology about aerial ramming by Belted kingfishers, and Paul Hendricks is the lead on that one because he's a zoologist. I learned so much from him. And also, we decided to do a bit of our own digging. This is Lisa, me, and Paul took the picture. One season we went across the creek and we climbed up the bank and we stuck a measuring tape into the tunnel, and it was found out the burrow. It was a 4.5-foot long tunnel to the nest burrow, measured down from the top, went back, dug down, got into the burrow, and were able to get a whiff of what was there because it was strong. And that's why I'm giving that kind of look, because that's like uric acid, from those chicks in there. But what was interesting is it's not messy at all, because the chicks have a different chemistry than the adults, and they are able to digest all the fish bones. So it's actually pretty tidy in there, it's just this dirt burrow, and they even kick that, uric acid smell back to the back. So it's a pretty tidy burrow. And I will say that we put it all back together, and in future years, the kingfishers sometimes reuse this nest. So we didn't do too much damage. But I wanted to show you what really happens with the adults. This is what they do. They cast a pellet, which is very hard to see. This photo actually came from an Audubon person, Elva Paulson, over in Roseburg. So I was like, wow, you got that photo. So that's only maybe a sight a kingfisher lover would be pretty thrilled about. But on a more beautiful scene, I spent quite a bit of time becoming intimate with my home stream. I had spent so much time. I had moved from Oregon, actually, originally to Missoula to get my master's degree at University of Montana, and I spent a lot of time on the creek, but I never came to know it until I was doing this with kingfishers and the many animals that would come by, or I would get to witness or see signs of, and the birds. These are some of my favorite residents there: the varied thrush in the middle, the spotted sandpiper, the cedar waxwing, and of course the dipper. And once I had quite an experience with this mink. So here we are. I'm going to read this part out of the book. Seeking the Halcyon bird, I've come closer to wildlife than ever before. Like one afternoon in late September of 2011, seated by the upper nest bank, drinking in the domain of kingfishers with no real purpose, the creek bubbled over a glossy rock with a gulp and glug, and maroon dogwood leaves shook in a slight breeze. Then, like a river phantom, a sinewy mink flowed over my outstretched bare legs. Feeling the rippling of chocolate-hued fur, I knew the meaning of becoming one with the wild neighborhood. And that's beautiful stones of Rattlesnake Creek that I can't stop describing in the book because they're so gorgeous. Well, I did eventually decide to take off after my son graduated from high school in 2015. I learned this lesson. The kingfisher's rollicking, rolling, ratchety staccato calls signal our awakening. Attend to be alive is to spread our wings and see where they take us. And I felt like I definitely had gained more strength and confidence, and maybe some of that kingfisher's bravado, headfirst plunge, and spent a year in my pop-up camper traveling around and decided to move back to Oregon. And I've been happily returned to Oregon since 2016. And here, and those are my little fuzzy pictures. This is a kingfisher on the Deschutes River. And I have to say, just yesterday, I thought, oh, I'm coming over here. I've got to check this nest bank that I know of near Benham Falls. And sure enough, there was a pair there. And not only was there a pair there, I saw the male feed the female a fish, which is a lovely thing to witness, and you don't always get to see it. So that's quite a courtship treat. Well, here's just a few ways that you do see kingfishers. They are not above using artificial wires across water. This is quite a series of them. I took this photo down when I was at the Winter Wings Festival in Klamath Falls. And I also wanted to point out, so I'm just going now into this things to look for when you're out checking out kingfishers. I think their flight is amazing, the way they scoop sometimes so low with those wings. So look for that. And also, when a kingfisher is just flying along, you might notice the position of the head. This kingfisher is kind of, I call this, he's just strolling. Got a little fish, not in a hurry. You know, I'm just going to look up. But if you see the same kingfisher, when there's an intruder, and you know, sometimes their territory is like a mile or so on a river area. It depends on what their habitat is. He will like put down his head and be super aerodynamic like a jet and just go after that other kingfisher. So they can really look different. And they can very much look different. These are some funny poses. I've never quite seen a kingfisher look like that one with a straight on look. So some of these are from a friend of mine in Boise who's a kingfisher fan. And that same friend, Ken Miracle, took these pictures in case any of you are wondering just how big a fish a kingfisher can catch. This Rocky Mountain whitefish, I think, was too big. So this might be the limit. Right there. Well, before we come to an end, and I'm almost at the end of the program, I just have a little something for all of you to do. And this is the Metolius River. It's a place that I love. I'm sure quite a few of you know it. And it's a great kingfisher river too. So right now, just think of a stretch of water. It could be a bay or lake or marsh. Familiar to you, maybe the coastline, and just think of a time when you felt really connected to a wild, watery neighborhood, the sound of fish rising, maybe a beaver, a geese honking. And just go there for a minute and think of how many beautiful messengers there are from our wild waters. And then we'll add this. Well, the kingfisher is my compass, my way still of finding true north. And I am always alert to that awakening call. And besides being a bird of many secrets, because belted kingfishers are so connected to waterways across North America, they do make incredibly important messengers for all of us. They're sort of linking the headwaters all the way to the sea. And they have something about these qualities I think about, those ones that make them difficult to follow, that they're elusive and skittish and a nemesis for a photographer and territorial, but they're also these egalitarian parents. They're so magnificent. They have, I think, what it takes to guard and defend their homes, our homes, with love. So thank you, and I'm ready now for questions.
If you have any questions, I'll try to repeat them so we get them over Zoom also.
We can be a tag team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the nestlings produce fecal sacs that the adults carry out of the burrow, or?
This is a question about, do the young produce a fecal sac that then is carried out?
Not that I have ever read about. That's no. I think it's because I think what does come out is just a more fine uric acid that they could then kick back up against the wall. But as far as I know, no. Yeah. Yeah.
It's easy to imagine a young kingfisher swallowing a fish the wrong way, tail first. Has that been documented, and what happens?
The question is about, does a kingfisher sometimes get the fish backwards and swallow it tail first, and what happens?
Well, I'm just guessing here, but considering when they're little, they've always been fed it the correct way, right? Because the parents give it to them head first. So I would think they would just then, because of that, be more attuned to turning the fish right away. That said, anything's possible. Keep watching.
Is there any bringing of additional material into the nest hole, or do they just lay the eggs on the dirt in the nest?
The question is about the nest hole, and does it have material brought in like sticks and feathers and things to make it nice and soft, or is it just dirt?
Just dirt. Yeah. And what's amazing is I'm always impressed the way when these, after a parent has like waddled back all the way back into that dirty tunnel and come out, there's like sparkling white. I'm like, where's the dirt? So no, they don't line their nests. Yeah.
Just how deep they make them depend on, like, it's gonna be a lot colder up in Montana where they probably nest. They make them deeper where it's colder and more shallow, maybe here where it's,
The question is about how deep they make the burrow, and is that perhaps contingent on the weather or heat or how cold it is?
That's a cool question. As far as I know, it's more random than that. It probably has more to do with the substrate itself in terms of how far back they can go. Because some banks, they all have to be the right substrate. Like they can't be too hard to dig. They can't collapse, and then they can't have too many roots in them, or rocks in a way. So I think where it's really perfect digging, that's probably where it said they go deeper. As if they can. And when you think about it, the temperature is pretty steady, and once you're underground. And one thing that's nice about these subterranean burrows is there has been documentation of in a cold place where the male kingfishers use those burrows in the winter to find a place that's really nice, climate controlled space. But I do like that question. I don't know, but as far as I know, that's not a factor.
Jim,
Are there any known nest predators?
are there known nest predators?
Yes, snakes, mink, if they can get up in them. One of the threats, of course, is if they put if the hole is too accessible, a mink or a snake or something, so could get in there. Those are the main ones. I imagine, if another kind of predator, maybe, a raccoon might, but the trick is for the kingfishers to position those nest holes where they're not going to get flooded out and where they're above the reach of snakes and mink and things too. But yeah, one thing I didn't mention, I'm just gonna add to it because it made me think about this. Someone might ask this, but this is not a predator thing, but I often get a question asked about, are there other birds that use the burrow? And northern rough-winged swallows love old kingfisher nests. And they also, as I write about in my book, they can be incredibly pesky and choose active kingfisher nests.
Wow.
So do they fight to keep them out of there or?
There was a question about, do they fight each other, the swallows and the kingfishers?
Well, yeah, the kingfisher, I've watched a kingfisher come out while she's incubating eggs or he's incubating eggs and chase away these rough wings that are like, not only they're at the entry, but they'll go in. And so it's not really a fight, but she's chasing away. That said, I'm glad you asked that. This photographer who lends me so many pictures showed this rather amazing photo of a kingfisher that had killed a rough-winged swallow, had it in its beak. So, yeah.
Yes.
So the clutch of eggs seems awfully large. Is there a great mortality rate for fledgling?
Question about the number of eggs in the nest and the mortality rate of those nests, of those eggs.
Yeah, you're right. You know, what's typical is that the chicks do really well because that's a protected nest site, right? So they tend to all hatch. But that first year must be pretty darn rough on them, because otherwise we would have a lot more kingfishers. And what's amazing, well, maybe not so amazing, but because the belted kingfisher is not endangered or something, we don't have the kinds of studies, and also because they're hard to study. So we don't have a lot of information on how well the fledglings do. There's some studies, behavioral studies, things that I did look at, and they showed the return was pretty low for the young ones the next year into that area, but they also could be trying to find another spot. But yeah, like a lot of birds, I bet that first year is pretty tough. And when you think about it, they're when I've seen them, and it's like you've seen this probably with other young birds, they're kind of dopey. Like, you know, I can walk right up to it. It's like, no, you're supposed to be a little bit worried, you know. And so they have to learn that pretty quickly, don't they?
They have special adaptations to hold on to slippery fish, like sort of serrated bill.
A question about the bill of the kingfisher and whether it's specially adapted to hold slippery fish.
It is. Yeah, it does have a slight serration on it. And I have a friend who was on a kingfisher study, and he had his finger sliced open by a big, he said they're also really sharp. Yeah, and so when they go under water to catch a fish, you know, it is kind of a scissoring thing.
There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay,
If you wanna-
you go ahead, Maria.
So one question from the chat was, what was the pellet we saw in the photo?
What was in the pellet?
Fish bones.
Okay. And then I've read your book as a selection for discussion by Great Old Broads for Wilderness, Willamette Valley.
Yay!
Love the book. Where do we review it?
Oh, well, I would love to have, this is a great question. It's like I set this up or something. You know, it actually does help my book move up in sales on Amazon. So if people would, you know, you don't have to buy it from Amazon, and I've heard actually, you know, sometimes bookstores will choose things by how many reviews are on Amazon. So if you want to do an Amazon review, that would be really nice. And Goodreads are the two I would recommend. Thank you.
One more question. Why do kingfishers have such large heads, and what about that punk feather do?
What about that punk feather do and the large heads? Well, you know, sometimes those questions are hard to answer, aren't they? You know, like, why is something the way it is? Because I just know that it just seems very, very efficient for that head first dive. And I know there's been some thought about like, do you need extra strength in the skull or something if you're gonna go head first? But there hasn't been a conclusive answer to that. And the crest, there's all those 4 species in Megarsol are the crested kingfishers. So most kingfishers don't have the crest, but they do. It is part of their behavior. They can raise them up a little bit and down. So, it adds to their ability to communicate in some way too. But that's just me making my little, if anyone else has some thoughts on it.
It might have something to do with aerodynamics.
The answer,
Because of the size of the bill.
yeah, it might have something to do with the crest, might have something to do with the aerodynamics as it's flying, keep it.
The crest
Steady.
or the head,
The size of the head.
the size of the head. Yeah, the size of the head. That's what I could have thought too. Yeah, that it might have something to do with aerodynamics. Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
And just real quickly,
Okay.
before you go, I will be in the back with sorry, we're gonna let Dennis say this.
No, okay, I just want to thank you all for being here. Marina will be in the back. And also, don't forget, next month, May 23rd, we have the other bird with the big bill and the fancy head. So the tufted puffin, that's gonna really be good. So come back for that. And if you're able to help with the chairs, they go on these little racks over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.